I have the best job because whenever I'm feeling tired or I'm stressed out about something, I just go for a walk in the cloud forest. One of the things that is very interesting about our campus is that, you know, the architecture is, it represents the vernacular architecture of Costa Rica, okay? Like we didn't want it to build like, you know, huge buildings that stick out from the environment. Like we wanted to have, you know, like the buildings just enough like indoor space so that like we can, you know, stay dry during a rain or during a storm. But in reality, the whole property, the whole area is like a live classroom, okay? And so the idea, we encourage our students to be out all the time, like looking at the insects, looking at the frogs, talking with the people who pass, like walk by, because that's another characteristic of our program. You know, we try to make our program very, very open to the local citizens, you know, because it's not only conservation in reality, it's not, you know, it's not something that can be isolated to, you know, biologists, ecologists, you know, it's a human activity. And so we try to promote that feeling, you know, and open the doors of our facilities to the community so they can come and share and also teach our students as well. Like for example, we have, you know, teachers who are, you know, like local farmers, and like they go and they organize themselves, you know, a coffee tour, for example, or a sustainable coffee tour, and so they become the teachers. And like when I was a student, I remember like the best way for me to learn is by looking and seeing what others do, okay? Not necessarily in a classroom, but also in a classroom and outside in the field. So that's what we try to do here in our campus. This is a picture of the canopy of the cloud forest. The cloud forest is defined, basically it's a type of forest that is very special because it sits on top of a mountain range, okay? And is almost year-round immersed in a cloud, okay, in clouds, okay? And so here in Monteverde we have, you know, is one of the most visited forests in Costa Rica. About 70,000 people from all over the world, especially from the US and Europe, come to visit this forest.
Visit this area.
Yes.
Wow, that's
and so there is, you know, the Monteverde Cloud Forest Reserve and the Children's International Rainforest. So those two parks all together, like combined to be, you know, the largest privately protected area in northern Costa Rica, okay? And so there are trails and there are, you know, many areas where you can visit. Like you can also go camping in certain sites, like, but for that you have to have a special permit. And one of the most interesting things that we have is suspension bridges, okay? So we have bridges throughout the parks, throughout the protected areas, where you can go and see the different layers
like an
of
observation.
The forest. Exactly.
Okay.
So you go like on a trail and all of a sudden like there is a suspension bridge that takes you like above the forest canopy and you're looking down, which is this picture here, you're looking down to the forest canopy, okay? In tropical ecosystems, you know, the biodiversity is very high, and especially in the cloud forest, about a third of the biodiversity is arboreal, meaning that there are lots of species that live up here that, you know, if you don't climb the trees or if you don't have one of those bridges, it will be very difficult to see. So that's one of the images that I brought here to share. This tree is one of the most amazing trees that we have, one of the most evolved trees that we have in the tropics. Like this is a strangler fig, okay? Figs, you know, like there is one commercial species that, you know, we make, you know, jellies and things. But in reality, there are about 700 species of figs in the world, okay? 700 in the world. And in Costa Rica, we have, you know, some species that are hemiepiphytic. They're called hemiepiphytic. Hemi means half, epiphytic means that it starts its life or that it lives on top of another tree, okay? Because one of the disadvantages of, you know, being a little plant in the forest floor is that the light that penetrates the forest canopy is limited, only 2%, okay? And so they have to compete for light. So this tree has learned to use, you know, like the wildlife, like the bats or the monkeys or the kinkajous, which are nocturnal creatures too, to disperse the seeds throughout the forest. And so when the seeds are defecated on top of any tree in the forest, okay, the seeds germinate and they start colonizing the crown of a host tree, okay, and it forms something like an umbrella on the host tree. And then it starts sending roots down, wrapping the stem of the host tree. And so Eventually the host tree dies out because, you know, it cannot produce more photosynthesis. And then the tree reaches the forest floor where most of the nutrients are, because the disadvantage of being an epiphytic plant is that, okay, you get good light from the early stages, but the nutrients are limited. Epiphytes absorb the nutrients from the vegetation, from the air actually. And so when they touch the forest floor, like that's where most of the nutrients are. And so it gets the best from both worlds, let's say. And so this is one of the largest trees. Some trees can be up to like 200 years old and like up to 50 meters of height above ground. This is one of my favorite, you know, situations or organisms that we have in the cloud forest. These are bioluminescent fungus, okay? And the only way how one can see a bioluminescent fungus is if you go in the woods at night without light, without flashlights, okay? And so that's one of the things that I do. Religiously, every Wednesday, okay, I go on a forest hike at night, okay? I take students, I take visitors, okay, in the park, and we go looking not only for bioluminescent fungus, but for, you know, nocturnal wildlife, okay, which there are many. Actually, a lot of people might think that the forest at night is scary and there's nothing happening there, but in fact, the forest at night is as active as it is during the day, except that the organisms that are active are different in the sense that they have to have special adaptations so they can survive and reproduce and eat in the absence of light. But this, you know, fungi, you know, they are their own kingdom, like they're not animals, they're not plants. But this one has gained the feature through evolution of glowing, okay? So you walk in the forest, you know, and then all of a sudden, like, you see like this glowing fungus. And like, you know, some people relate that to like, you know, tales, like, you know, histories and myths. But in reality, you know, it's a fungus that is either trying to do two things, okay? It could be indicating toxicity, okay, to the neighbors, like to the other organisms that live there, or it could be withdrawing, you know, the attention, like action working as a flag, you know, to call, let's say, a vector that is in charge of dispersing the spores throughout the forest. The reason why I say there could be two options is because we don't know yet, okay? It's one of the mysteries that we have in the tropics. Like, we don't know what is the chemical process and the actual reason why, you know, this fungus is bioluminescent. Okay?
So it's a living laboratory for research.
Exactly. That's the other, you know, step, and that's the other areas of you know, collaboration that we want to develop, you know, with as many organizations as possible. This picture here is looking from the cloud forest towards the Pacific Ocean, okay? So all the way down here is the Pacific, okay? It's not very clear in this picture, but, you know, it's looking from Monteverde down. And as you can see, there is not much forest. It's fragmented, okay? A lot of this forest has been cleared for agriculture, for mostly for agriculture and cattle, you know, and beef production. And so one of the challenges that we have is to recover, to restore some of this forest, because we know that the ecological integrity of our forest, which sits on top of the mountain range, is fully dependent to the connectivity with the lowland forest here, because all the way down here there is a mangrove forest, okay? And we know that there are species that migrate up and down, and so we need to restore, you know, the habitats to a certain stage so that the species can migrate up, because in reality, one of the things I mentioned before is that 70,000 people come to Monteverde, and so our economy is fully dependent on tourism. I mean, if we don't have the species, you know, there, if we don't have the fungi and the quetzals, etc., like, no one is going to want to visit, you know. And so in order to protect the ecology and the economy of our forests, like, we're trying to, that's one of the projects that I'm mostly involved, is to create a biological corridor here. And so the idea of having a biological corridor is not to extend the preserve, you know, all the way down, but to increase the habitat enough so that the species can migrate up and down. But the beautiful part of a biological corridor is that it's not like, you know, saying, well, like, you farmer, like, you're doing it wrong, like, you need to reforest your thing. No, the idea is to go and work with farmers and help, you know, work in a very participatory fashion so that we can, you know, like, increase the productivity of the land in less area, okay? So bringing technology, bringing new ideas, so that at the end, like we have, you know, like a human ecosystem that is more in balance, let's say, with the natural ecosystem, okay? And so that's one of the projects that I'm working on right now. And we're doing that through, you know, like through writing grants and like through finding associations with organizations around the world so that we can, you know, achieve that goal.
Well, thank you for sharing these pictures. I don't really want to come back. I want to stay in Costa Rica for just a minute. But now, I did a little homework, and I understand that you've written a book, and it's Common Trees of Cabo Blanco Absolute Nature Reserve. And I have a copy of the book here. Perhaps maybe you could tell us a little bit about this.
Okay. Yes, as the first thing that I did, I've always been, my mother calls me that, and what tells me that I'm like inquieto. Inquieto means like I'm always doing something, okay? I cannot be resting. So as soon as I graduated, I started working with Erin Lindquist, which is an ecologist from the University of Georgia. And she was doing a research project in Cabo Blanco, which